Okay, this is the video review for Planet X number 10 Moors, which is the Planet X version of Fall of Cybertron Starscream. I've never done a video review before, so excuse the dusty state of my desk and the fact this is very obviously filmed essentially on my cell phone. We'll start with the box. It's the standard Planet X numbered release box style. So the front of the box is the chest, the sides are the arms of the figures, and the back is meant to be the back of the figure. The art's quite nice. It's similar in style and texture to the Vulcan box, which is the only other Planet X release that I've got. Yeah. Now we'll move on to the figure itself. This is Planet X Moors. Now you get 4 accessories with it. There's 2 cannons. One's obviously for the left, one's for the right, but they are identical. And I'm assuming they match some weapon from Fall of Cybertron or War for Cybertron. I've not played those games in a while. There's a little bit of, as you can see, purple paint detailing on them, but otherwise they are just this dark grey plastic, and they've got these handles that fold. Now, the third accessory is this Energon mace, and finally you get a crown. I'll just chuck that across the set. You get a crown, and I've never used this before. I'll just pop that on now, just so we can all see that it works. Fantastic, and well, that can go away, never to be seen again. So before I get into the mechanics of the figure and things like that, I'll just do a quick size comparison. Now the obvious figure to compare it to is the official Fall of Cybertron Starscream. So I've just got the standard Hasbro release there. So you can see already that the Planet X release is a much larger and more substantial looking figure. For those of you looking for something more contemporary to compare it to, I've also got Titan's Return Wolfwire or Weird Wolf, and as you can see, I mean, it's been said to be about Voyager size Planet X Moors, but it's probably slightly larger by 2016 standards. Now the hands are 5mm pegs. They do that trick that's become quite popular where most of the 5mm peg is actually in the hand itself already, and then you just close the fists once you've put the weapon in. So the mace has got one of these deals where you pull it apart first so you don't stress any plastic, and then you do that. There you go. And again, look, I can only assume this is some kind of callback to Fall of Cybertron. I've not played that game in about 5 years, so yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, the mace isn't something I really use with this figure. It's stayed in the packet till about 3 minutes ago. Now the guns can be held by hand, like that, or they can be, and this is what I prefer, pegged into these 5mm pegs that are on the underside of the arms, similarly positioned to the Hasbro Fall of Cybertron Starscream. And that looks quite impressive for my money. So you get obviously rotation on these pegs like that, and then the actual handles themselves give a bit of rotation that way. Now, that's it essentially for the armament of the figure. There was some promotional shots that show the guns coming over the shoulders attached to these 5mm ports on the underside of the wings. I'm not going to do that, but you know, there's pictures of that available. Promo shots released by Planet X. I'll just get straight into the posability of the figure. So the head is on a ball joint. It's reasonably look, it's unrestricted. You do have to sort of wiggle the head as you're turning it if you don't want it to bang into these faux intakes at the back there. It can also tilt and nod. It's pretty good. Now the arm articulation is interesting. It's on one of the only problematic areas in that you've got these little chunks here. Now these are essentially the rear intakes. So these blue pieces are what forms the triangular tailpiece in jet mode. They end up here sort of in between the big wings and the torso. So you end up in a situation where unless the arms are all the way forward on their transformation joint, you do occasionally get this sort of bumping that may happen. It's not a big deal as long as you're careful when you're posing it. It just sometimes interrupts during play, and it does mean generally you do have to keep the arms quite forward on the transformation joints. Something you might have noticed there is that these shoulder flaps, they're not pinned down to anything, so they move when you move the arm forward. The arms are on universal, it's a universal joints, there's sideways, there's forward and back. There's also a shoulder shrug joint you get there that's used for transformation. The pauldrons are essentially on a universal joint. There's only one joint in there. So it swivels and it goes up and down. You get a bicep swivel. You get double jointed elbows for the transformation. The hands are, well, there's a swivel and there's up and down. The up and down's for transformation because the hands collapse into the forearms. The fists open, it's one solid chunk, as is the norm for the Planet X releases. There's a waist swivel, which is, you can get to about here before it starts crashing into things, so you can't do full 360 style. There's, the legs are universal, so there's full outward up to about there. Then there's forward and back. The knees are on a single joint, but it gets quite deep, so you can go there, certainly past the 90-degree mark. The legs swivel at the thigh. The feet are on ball joints. You get a lot more motion on the ball joint inward than you do outward. And otherwise, the toes are articulated, but only the front and the back toe. The side ones are not. So, I mean, look, this is a fairly impressive robot mode. It's certainly a lot more imposing than the Fall of Cybertron Hasbro Deluxe release. And it's also a lot more solid. So one of the issues that many people have noticed with the Fall of Cybertron Hasbro Deluxe is that it is essentially a hollow figure. So you can see there, it's essentially got a bit of a spine, and that's it. The rest of it's hollow. The Planet X10 Moors is solid. It all compacts quite well. So I'll just go into the only two issues I really have with this mode, and the first I've already touched on, which is the fact that the shoulder pauldrons bang into the intake wings on the back, and the second is that a lot of this, I mean, look, it's quite tight, the joints. My Planet X Vulcan was the same when I first got that. Oh, you'll have to excuse me, I've just disconnected the backpack from the torso of the figure. Yeah, Planet X10 Vulcan was similar when I first got it, and nothing on that has shaved off or become loose with time, but I mean, you get this sort of noise. That, to me, that sets my teeth on edge, you know? Aside from that, the only gripe I really have is that to do with the head, it's not, I'll just adjust my light here, it's not black. The promo shots had it as a black head, it's a blue head, and also there's no vents on the side of the head, which is the norm for a Starscream, and I'll be honest, I generally tend to prefer my Starscreams with vents on the side of the head. None of this is a deal killer for me. Aside from that, I think the only thing I've not shown is the light piping, which is quite nice. I'll just try and sort of play with the light. There we go, that's beginning to come through. Yeah, the light piping on this one's quite nice. So, before we get to transform it, I'll just do one last shot next to Fall of Cybertron Starscream. There you go. Leave me and my son alone. Okay. Now, transformation. Look, it's relatively straightforward apart from the backpack, which is perhaps needlessly one or two layers more complicated than it should be. So, we'll start then with the backpack. The backpack is held to the body by, and I'll just make sure you can see this. So these two connectors, there's one there, and there's one that is just there, these red pieces. They're part of the rib piece here, and they connect the torso to the backpack by way of these two grey tabs there. So the first thing you want to do is pull that out. Now, this is something that I got stuck on for about 15 minutes when I first got the figure, and that was in part because of poor quality control. I'll get to that in a minute. So the first thing you do here is you unclip from the backpack the two blue intake pieces that have got the red wings attached to them. And now these are on a sliding bar, so they can go up and down. So you slide them all the way back, and then you bring them inwards like that. So you clap them together. At that point, the rear stabilizers can rotate up. Then you want to get them, slide them back down out of the way. The rear stabilizers rotate into the middle like that. The two grey pieces meet and marry up by way of a set of tabs, and then the tail tabs together like that. Then you just rotate the wings, you compress them back down like that, and you, again, so this is on a sliding bar joint, you push it all the way back, and then these tabs here that previously secured the backpack to the torso by this rib piece, now secure the intakes and the wings by way of this tab here. So that slides down like that, and that slides down like that. Now, when I first got the figure, this swinging joint here, this grey piece had a bit of flash on it, and it wasn't coming down. I forced it and forced it and forced it, maybe thinking it was slightly gummed up because it was a new figure. There is a small stress mark. I'm not sure if you can see it just in there. Yeah, just in there, sorry. Yeah, eventually I realised there was a nub of flash that had to be shaved off with a blade at work, and everything worked as it should. It's something to be aware of, just because I've seen bits of flash hanging off other parts of this figure, and look, if it comes to it, don't force it, try and figure out what's wrong with it, because you wouldn't want to end up with a broken one of these. Anyway, so at that point you'll end up with something that looks like this, which is essentially, this is just the wing piece of the jet mode that gets flipped around. That's the most complex part of the transformation. Now, the next bit, we'll do the legs. So, the legs are similar to perhaps a slightly more complicated version of the Aerial Bot Combiner Wars legs. So they both flip open. You push out these shin pieces and flip out these. These end up being clasps that lock the front and the back of the vehicle mode together, and then the legs just collapse in on themselves, the same as the Combiner Wars Superion legs. Simple as that. And then the last step is you flip out these clasps, and they'll come in handy in a few minutes. So that's the legs. Now we'll do the arms. So the first step is you put the fists away. And this is an easy fit. You know, you end up sometimes with figures where the arms have to be positioned precisely in a certain way. This isn't one of those figures, fortunately. Then the next step, and this is where it becomes perhaps slightly finicky again, just because there's a lot of swinging things, is you take this torso piece here, the two sides of it. Those of you that go to the gym will know what these muscles are called. I don't. Swing out. They're on arms with ball joints. They just go in the middle here. There's no locking position for them. They do sort of sit in a natural divot that is there, but they don't lock into place. They just sort of hang. Then the whole thing slides back on this joint. So, let's see if I can make room for you to see. So this slides back into there, and then the wing assembly ends up clipping into the back of the feet. So you'll see there's a slot there and there. There's matching ones on the other side. They correspond with tabs on the bottom of that backpack wing piece. So once that is all together, which can be finicky at the best of times, there goes the left leg. I'm making a right mess of this. I'm aware the camera is probably not focusing the best right now. Once that's all together, these posts on the wing end up in the holes on the side there of the legs to help the connection secure. Oh, there we go. And that is essentially almost the back half of the figure fully done. The last step is that the toe flips in like that, and that is the back half of the figure. Now, for the front half, you've got to push this chest piece here, which ends up below the head in robot mode, out, and you can sometimes have to do that from inside the figure's chest. And then you take this intake piece and you rotate it back. And I've actually missed a step here because I'm a fool. Before you peg this down, you've got to rotate these intakes down on this swinging joint here. So they end up sitting underneath where the backpack sits. Get all that plugged in again. Okay, so this all comes up. The piece that was previously in front of the head now covers the head. This is where the transformation gets perhaps slightly interesting. So you flip the nose cone out, that's standard. Now, the way this will work is basically, these pieces close over the head, the arms bunch up, these connect to the elbows on the arm, and the pauldrons plug into that. It sounds like a bit of a mess, it looks like a bit of a mess, but it provides quite a solid robot mode, vehicle mode, sorry, so we'll give this a go and hope we can get it first time. So, now there's a tab there that goes into this slot, and yep, there we go. And now the same thing on the other side, so the shoulder armour rotates up, the arm crunches in on itself, the whole thing folds down, and then the tab goes into the slot. Okay, so then the two rib pieces end up plugging together, this red piece here, and now what happens is these clasps end up hooking onto the back of the elbows because there's hooks for them on the back there, so like that, and like that. Alright, now there is, after doing the usual massaging, the Planet X10 in vehicle mode. So, as you can see from the top, it is it's certainly on topic, it's multi-layered. It does turn into a bit of a mess from the side and from the bottom, but then what Jet Transformer in 2016 doesn't. Now you can have these wings in or out. I prefer to have them in for jet mode and out for robot mode. There's nowhere, as far as I can see, for the mace to store in this mode. There's nowhere for the crown to store in this mode. The cannons can plug onto these 5mm ports on the underside of the wings, although they're quite finicky about doing so, just because the handles do like to collapse back into the cannons themselves. Oh, you got it first time. So, that is what that looks like. Now the landing gear. Unfortunately, it doesn't have proper flip-down landing gear in the sense of something like a Masterpiece Starscream or something like that. So, the way the landing gear works is you rotate the toes out, so that's the position they'd be in if it was a foot. You keep rotating, the bottom of the toes of the back skids. To get the front skid out, you've got to partially untransform the figure. So there's no opening trapdoor, there's no clearance unless you split the rib piece. And then just go in and flip out the skid, just like that, and then together you get landing gear. So I'll just quickly, I've still got the full Cybertron Starscream here, I'll just transform that off screen. While I do that, I'll just talk a bit about the quality of Planet X number 10. I'll be honest, the Planet X Grimlock release that I've got, that's one of the sturdiest third-party figures I've come across. It's extremely playable. I've had no issues with it, with any breakage. I've had no worries about it breaking. To be frank, Planet X10 feels perhaps a level below that. It feels slightly more brittle, slightly less dense, and I'm aware that a part of that is that at the end of the day, Vulcan was quite a simple figure compared to Mors, which is more complicated, produces a more complex and layered-looking bot mode. So I'm aware that there's not going to be that simplicity and solidity in the engineering, but it doesn't feel to me quite as playable. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and it certainly is a playable figure. I mean, I suppose in many ways it's an unfair comparison just because Planet X Grimlock is, to me, one of my easily in the top 3 third-party figures I've ever owned, and it's one of the most playable third-party figures. So yeah, perhaps not a fair comparison at the end of the day. In the meantime, here is Fall of Cybertron Starscream. So I'll place them next to each other. So as you can see, I mean, look, there's no comparison, really. Planet X Mors is sharper, it's bigger, it's... I mean, look, if you thought that Mors was a mess from the bottom, then that's what the Fall of Cybertron Starscream looks like from the bottom. Yeah, it's certainly a much more menacing and accurate jet mode. So I'm just holding them together there. I mean, look, for the sake of scale, I've trotted out Titans return blur in vehicle mode, just, for having a modern figure that other people might have. Yeah, I mean, it's comfortably slightly larger than Voyager sized for 2016. And yeah, now look, by way of closing, this is, to my mind, a fantastic figure. It's certainly worth picking up for the price that I got it for, which was the Robot Kingdom price of 70. I think at the time I pre-ordered it was $75 US. I know that TF Source and Chosen Prime and other sites like that have it for about $100 US. To be quite frank, I'm not sure if it's worth that unless you love the character or love the game. I love Starscream. I don't particularly have a massive amount of fondness for the Fall of Cybertron and War for Cybertron games. But for $75 US, certainly, it's definitely worth the value. It's got a premium feel to it. It's, yeah. I mean, look, I feel like there could have been perhaps more accessories. I mean, like I said, you do end up with 2 guns, a club, and a crown. That's really, to be perfectly honest, the only major criticism I can levy on it, apart from the arms banging into the stabilizers in vehicle mode. Apart from that, by way of closing comment, and this has been mentioned in the TFW forum thread, and I hate to end on a low note, the instructions are rubbish. This is what you get. This is, it's smaller than an A4 page. It's 42 steps. Doesn't go into the different ways that the weapons can plug into both modes. Doesn't go into the different ways you can interact with all the other accessories that the figure's got. I'm not even sure at this point that the cockpit opens. The proto figures definitely showed an opening cockpit. I'm not game to try it just after my experience with almost snapping off the intake with the wing attached, just because of a quality control issue. So I'm not sure if something gumming up that this join here, or if it's just not meant to be opened. Yeah. But let's not close on a sour note. It's a fantastic looking bot mode if a bit fiddly. Transformations involved. The body of the complexity is to do with the backpack. The rest of it's reasonably straightforward. And as you can see, it's quite a sharp and dangerous looking jet mode. At the end of the day, it's definitely worth the $75 I paid for it, and if you can get it for anywhere around that price, it's certainly worth picking up. I'm aware that there's almost nailed on to be a slew of repaints coming down the line. Certainly wouldn't mind getting my hands on a Skywarp based off this figure. Anyway, until next time, and next time being the next time in my life I find myself with a figure that about 4 other people around the whole world seem to have, yeah, this has been Sharky McShark.